Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed that Frankie Beverly and Mays instrumental. Yep. Okay. We have about 30 more seconds before we get started. But let me go ahead and thank you for being here. My name is Michaela. I'm the event coordinator for Sankofa Video and Books. We are a small Black-owned business located on Georgia Avenue, right across the street from Howard University. If you want to find out more information about us, you can do so by going to www.sankofa.com. Tonight, we're so happy to be presenting a conversation, a Q&A, and a presentation by Jillian Hishaw, Esquire, on her latest release, Systematic Land Theft, The History of U.S. Tactics Keeping Tribal Nations from Reclaiming Their Land and Blacks Landless, which is an abbreviated version of a larger text that details how stolen tribal land was used by white settlers and the federal government to leverage land as collateral to become economically superior over all demographic groups. And of course, we're joined by Jillian Hishaw, Esquire, the woman who wears many, many hats. And let me tell you a little bit more about her. She has 20 years of professional experience in law, speaking, and writing. Hishaw has worked as an environmental planner for a local city, a state conservation agency, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Hishaw has a Bachelor's of Science in Biology from Tuskegee University, along with a Juris Doctorate and a legal master's in agricultural law from the University of Arkansas-Fayetteville. So without further ado, here is Jillian Hishaw, Esquire. How are you doing tonight?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. It's our pleasure. So let me know when you're ready to get started and I can bring up your presentation.
I am ready.
All right, here we go.
Okay, can you see it? Can you see it?
Oh, yes, it's perfect.
Oh,
We can see
okay.
everything. Mhm.
Okay, great. So thank you everyone for joining tonight and taking time out of your busy schedule. Tonight rather, I'm going to focus on the book Systematic Land Theft. It has been a 14-year process in the making. The first three chapters were written between 2007 and 2009. And based on those three chapters, I created a course at the University of Missouri, Kansas City back in 2009 as an adjunct professor. And then I gradually worked on the book and finished the majority of 4 through 12 chapter between last year and this year. So, like Michaela referenced, there are two books. The short book is available at Sankofa, and they do have books back in stock. And it focuses on the intro through chapter 4. And so that's primarily what we're going to touch on, as well as the epidemic of Black land loss. And so, as Ms. Michaela stated, I have over 20 years of experience in ag, working in primarily public sector work. And I currently am the founder and director of Family Agriculture Resource Management Services, abbreviated FARMS. We've been in operation for about 8 years, and we have three different program areas. One, of course, is legal services, where I provide free and low cost services to aging rural farmers of color. Not only here in the Southeast, but across the United States. And also, we have a food bank program where I raise money and write grants, and I pay the farmers for their produce, and then it's donated. We have purchased and donated nearly 22 million, I wish it was 20 million, 2 million pounds of produce in about 5 different countries. And then the third program is our Farmers Relief Fund, where we provide emergency financial assistance to farmers in crisis. So we purchased three generators for aging farmers in Louisiana recently due to Hurricane Ida. And those farmers range in age between 80 to 91. So all of the slides today, along with my words tonight, are copyright protected. I do not own the right to Sankofa's logo. I was only using it for presentation purposes. Again, I would like to give a special thanks to Mrs. Hyman, her lovely husband, Mr. Youssef, along with Miss Joni Eisenberg, Miss Michaela, and Jonathan. The agenda for tonight, the purpose of the book, and then the second agenda item will focus a little bit on conservation, tribal matters, specifically regarding the 5 civilized tribes of Oklahoma's ownership of enslaved Africans, which includes my great-great-grandmother, as well as the epidemic of Black land loss, a case study, and of course, my nonprofit Farms Impact. So we'll start off with the picture that starts with chapter 1. So there is a transition photo and quote between all 12 chapters. The book consists of 12 chapters. Each chapter has a chapter summary, review questions, and a case study. And so at the beginning of chapter 1, I focus on, quote, the Kill the Buffalo campaign. And here is a picture of basically a large amount of buffalo head, the skeletons of buffalo head. And particularly, let's go back to the 1800s. So between a 10-year period, a decade, at the beginning of, I believe, the 1870s, within the Plain States. And when I say the Plain States, I'm talking about the Dakotas, Kansas, Missouri, where I'm from. About 60 million buffalo roamed those Plain States. But unfortunately, I believe it was by 1889, less than 600 buffalo in population existed. And so the purpose of European settlers and the, quote, Kill the Buffalo campaign was to kill tribal nations' primary source of food, and then also source of fur. I mean, they use every aspect of the buffalo for tools, for also building, and of course for eating. And so when they killed all of the majority of the 60 million, that basically starved the tribal members off of their land. And so this was just one tactic that European settlers used to take tribal nations' land. Another aspect of this was, unfortunately, the five civilized tribes of Oklahoma adoption of enslavement of enslaved Africans. And so the five civilized tribe consists of Cherokee, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Seminole Nation, and as well as the Cree Nation. The Cree Nation owned my great great grandmother. My family is originally from Oklahoma. But these five tribes were primarily located in the Southeast. They were located in Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, the Carolinas, and even lower southern regions of Tennessee. And what they did was that during 1830, 1832, during the time of the Removal Act, they were forced off of their land due to bad, quote, treaty agreements with the federal government. And the federal government basically paid them pennies per acre for their land. And, you know, everyone knows about the historic Trail of Tears, but indigenous and native residents were not the only people that were along moving that Trail of Tears. Unfortunately, it was also enslaved Africans that were dragged by the members of these five civilized tribes, which are now known as the five civilized tribe of Oklahoma. But again, they originated in the Southeast region. Now, Oklahoma was not a state that was incorporated. And so during this time, it was called, quote, Indian Territory, but eventually it was incorporated as a state. Now, I go into this in further detail in chapter 1. State incorporation was basically the adoption of European law, especially known as common law. Common law was brought by European settlers. For European settlement, there was no incorporation of statehood or county or taxes or things. Everyone lived communally, and the majority of people that resided here in the United States or the North American region were indigenous people, not European. And so upon arriving and settling at Oklahoma, or again, the Indian Territory, they also, like I said, brought enslaved Africans. And this was based on the fact that they were maintaining plantations, particularly like, for example, in North Carolina and in South Carolina and Georgia. Indigenous and tribal nations had adopted, like I stated before, slavery. And they maintained slave plantations while they were landowners in the Southeast. And so they brought their enslaved to Indian country and set up shop. And they dragged and owned in Oklahoma, I believe it was 12,260 to be exact. And within this time period of decades, they used enslaved Africans to build up their farms, their ranches. They also used labor for salt mining in Arkansas and things of this nature. And so the tribes, the five civilized tribes, are quite wealthy. And they're quite wealthy because it was based on the backs of enslaved Africans. Example, including my great great grandmother. And so next topic is freedmen. So many people don't realize that these five civilized tribes, they fought in the Confederacy. They did not fight on the Union side. They fought the Confederacy because they wanted to keep slavery going, and they did not want abolishment of slavery. And so they did fight in the Confederacy. Of course, as we know, we lost. I mean, the Confederacy lost, and we won freedom, quote, freedom, um, during that time. And so by 1865, it was pretty much a wrap with the Civil War. And so they entered into a treaty agreement, the Treaty Agreement of 1866. Treaty Agreement of 1866 within the five civilized tribes, all of the five civilized tribes under this treaty, they agreed to provide tribal rights to all of the, quote, freedmen that were formerly enslaved Africans. Unfortunately, all of the tribes did not live up to their treaty agreement, similar to the federal government. And so it is immense hypocrisy on their part, particularly with the Cree Nation, which is the nation that owned my great-great-grand. They eliminated and basically got rid of tribal rights in 1979 for freedmen. And since then, no Black person or freedman has had tribal rights. And of course, that's when they started getting settlement money from the federal government because of the basically lowball tactics of the treaty agreements that they signed as part of the Removal Act of the 1830s. And so during this time, there's been several lawsuits. I interviewed Miss Marilyn Vaughn in Chapter 4. In Chapter 4, my family story is the case study. And I interviewed Miss Marilyn Vaughn. She is the one and only Black woman that filed suit against the Cherokee Nation starting in 2000. And she lost that case, but she refiled. And she won the case. And she also won a recent election to be on tribal council in Oklahoma this past September. So kudos to Ms. Vaughn. But she was very gracious with her time. And there's a detailed interview about her legal process and the work that needs to be done for freedmen like my family, which is the Hishaw family out of Missouri and Oklahoma. Next, I will briefly touch on the history of Black land loss in particular. So the majority of the book is focused on Black and Indigenous land loss. There's a small section in Chapter 8, I believe, and 9 that focuses on Zimbabwe and land loss in South Africa, recent land loss in South Africa. But the majority of the book focuses on Indigenous and Black land loss. And so as we're familiar with the story of Black land loss, we were brought to this country as enslaved to, of course, forced labor and things like this. But upon Reconstruction, some people were actually given the 40 acres and the mule. And that was primarily in South Carolina and the lower part of Georgia and Mississippi. But within 6 months, most of that land was taken back and given back to the original white landowners. But a few people were allowed to keep their, quote, 40 acres and a mule, but very, very few. But at the turn of the century, as we all know, by the early 1900s, we owned estimates up to 16 to 20 million acres of land. That was the pinnacle of Black land ownership. But unfortunately, as of date, we've lost over 90% of that land. According to the 2017 USDA census, we own about 4 million or 4.5 million currently. But don't trust those numbers because they are immensely skewed. And so on average, we lose about 30,000 acres in Black land ownership per year. That's why I titled my organization's website 30,000 acres, to represent the amount of acres that we are losing constantly on a yearly basis. And again, it was ownership between 16 to 20 million acres. And so I just want to touch briefly on a case study that it's quite vivid of the calls and the cases that I have been litigating and managing over, the past 15, 20 years. And I always reference the Beckett case as one of the worst, unfortunately. And so let's go back, shall we, to the late 80s, early 90s. And we will basically go to the Hilton Head area and Vaughnville, South Carolina, to be more specific. Audrey Moffett, she is a real estate agent. I believe she's still living in the Hilton Head region of South Carolina. And she approached Miss Beckett that was dying of cervical cancer. She had a fourth grade education and she was in hospice. And she was one of several landowners, heirs owners of a 335-acre farm plot of land located in Jasper County. And she told Miss Beckett that she was there and she was selling, I believe, life insurance or something along those lines, when really, unfortunately, she sold Miss Beckett. She didn't sell Miss Beckett an insurance policy. As she told Miss Beckett, but really she was having Miss Beckett sign away her deed rights. And she only gave Miss Beckett $750 when the value of that land, of her share, was worth $4,625. And so she took the paper, and now she was basically an heirs owner. Like, she basically replaced Miss Beckett as a family member owner. And so part of the problem is that 68% of Black land owned in this country is owned as heirs property. And when I say heirs property, I mean that traditionally you have a mother and father that, or even a single person that will buy the land outright, and they'll have kids, they die without a will, and then 5 or 6 generations later you have multiple heirs owning this, in this case, the 335-acre farm. And so when one of the family members sells to a third party, and in this case it was Miss Moffett, that third party basically replaces the family member and becomes the owner. And that third party can force the sale of the remaining heirs in what's called a court partition sale. And that was the strategy and the motive of Miss Moffett, along with many primarily white people. And this is basically how we lose so much land so quickly each year. And so Miss Moffett moved on, and she did this to 6 other heirs. That illiteracy is definitely still a problem when it comes to the farmers, the aging farmers. And she gave these farmers in total, the 6, $6,600, when collectively their share was worth $55,833. And so she commenced to going to the court and filing a request for a partition sale. And of course, the white judge granted it, and the land was sold. And the land was sold, 75%, if that, below market value. It was divided up into 2 tracts. And so 285 acres was bought by Miss Moffett for $146,000. The remaining 50 acres was bought by a friend of hers for $75,000. Now, at the time of the sale, which was by this time, I believe, 1991, January 1992, she bought it for $146K, but the market value at that time was worth $1.7 million. And you could just imagine what it's worth now. And so I go into detail about this case in, I believe it was chapter 11 or 10, along with, several other cases and interviews of farmers as well in chapter 8. And so if you buy the full book, you'll learn more about these case studies and cases as well. Unfortunately, like most cases here, it did not end well. The family sued on fraud, and the judge acknowledged, yes, she was fraudulent in her actions with Miss Beckett and the 6 other heirs, and the judge gave the family a settlement, I think of like $50,000, but it had to be split, 30 to 50 plus ways between all of the family members. And so, ironically, again, since she was considered a family member and heirs owner, Miss Moffitt received $12,000 out of the $50,000 that she had to pay the family. And so she got some of her money back. She got basically a third of her money back. So I want to wrap up because I don't want to waste too much. I don't want to take up too much time. I do want to leave 30 minutes to discussion, but these are just some of the photos throughout the years of our food bank program. This is, on the right-hand side, this is a photo of some collards that we purchased January of 2020 in Alabama. And again, overall, we've purchased a little over 1.5, nearly 2 million pounds of produce. We started working in Haiti in 2015, and this program has just taken off. We now have projects in Sierra Leone, Trinidad, and South India, and we're expanding as well. And so also I want to mention that the 4th edition of my first book, Don't Bet the Farm on Medicaid, is now available only on my website, JillianHishaw.com. All of the purchases of my books contribute to farms programming. So it contributes to me offering free legal services to the farmers because it's not cheap. But I do want to take a few moments to discuss and just focus a little bit on this book. And the reason why I wrote this book first and released it back in 2018. And people don't realize that when your elder or your family member qualifies for Medicaid, there's a difference between Medicare, but Medicaid, that automatically opens up their real estate assets to a Medicaid lien. So say we have an elder, he's 80, he needs to go into the nursing home, but he lives on a farm, or he lives in the house in, in DC, somewhere in DC. And so, he needs to qualify for Medicaid because, the average cost of nursing homes is, over $5,000 monthly. And so he has this asset, the house in the city or the land in Tennessee, and it's still in his name, and you sign him up for Medicaid. Well, when you sign him up for Medicaid, that creates a whole bunch of problems, and usually you have to spend down, so to speak. But basically, if you owe an outstanding debt to the nursing home not only has a state, but they have the federal authority to put a lien on your land. And this forces the land as well as the house. And so this book provides basically abbreviated estate planning advice for home and land owners. I mean, it states, don't bet the farm, but it's also the house and the farm, whether it's in the city or in a rural area. And we need to protect our land. And, just going back to specifics regarding land tenure and Black land loss, just overall across all demographics in this country, we lose 175 acres per hour to urban development. And the focus of farms is definitely not urban. The farming that I only know is in rural areas. It's farming is on acres. And we are losing our food source at a rapid race, 3 acres per minute to be exact. So we definitely need to save more acres, at this point. Also, we need to protect Black rural farmers. We have forgotten about the Black rural farmer. I know everybody's urban, but we need to focus on the Black rural farmer as well. And that's what farms in my work is all about. And in particular, between 2006 and 2015, the Black farmer was the most foreclosed on across all demographics at a 13%. Particularly in the Obama administration, Black farmers lost more land under Obama than Bush. And I'm not being, swayed either other way. I'm just stating the facts. And so it was a 13% foreclosure rate within USDA. And particularly back again in '06 and 2005. But yet, Black farmers made up 3% of direct USDA direct loans. And so these are things just to consider, when I continue to implore people to support the Black rural, and I emphasize rural farmer. Now, again, here is just more information. Please subscribe to my newsletter. I will be offering special Black Friday offers regarding all my books, but particularly regarding systematic land theft. And again, a percentage of all sales support my nonprofit work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So right now you are providing us time to have a Q&A, correct?
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So I see one comment, but we have someone with 20 years of experience right now. So if you have any questions that you have, I beg you to ask them now, because this is a great opportunity. Right now, we just have a thank you.
You're welcome.
For the information. While people are waiting to respond or ask a question, I have a question. I know we heard about the downfalls and how we've lost our land. What has been the most positive experience you've had with dealing with getting land back to people?
Well, there's been so many positive experiences with stopping foreclosures of land. And that was one of the first cases that I took back in 2015, was we stopped the foreclosure of a farm. And I believe it was a 4 to 5 generation farm. We stopped that foreclosure. And then also the work that I'm continuing to do in South Carolina through the nonprofit and partnerships. This year, particularly in the fall alone, we just saved, I believe it was $451,000 worth of land in the Geechee Gullah community in Hilton Head, South Carolina. And then last year, we were able to save over nearly 1.1 million on real estate assets in the Gullah area in South Carolina again. And so having those types of successes definitely keeps hope alive, so to speak.
That's right. Yeah, you have to have those experiences to keep you moving forward. We have a question from Jessica Simmons. She says, how can we best support Black rural farmers?
Yes, so definitely one thing is to purchase CSAs from Black rural farmers, and there are plenty in the Maryland Eastern Shores area that I would recommend that she seek out. And also the Black Farmers Index is a definitely great resource to look up farmers in your local area.
Wonderful. What is the CSA?
Basically, it's a subscription agreement. So think of the meal kits like Blue Apron, but instead of buying directly from Blue Apron, you would buy directly from a farmer, and it gives direct sales to the farmer. And it's basically a monthly boxed, whether it's meat or potatoes or produce, but it's just basically a subscription agreement.
Wonderful. Okay, and we have another one from Nina K. She says, what made you focus your study and awareness on land losses amongst the Black community?
So it was due to my own personal land loss story. I am originally from Kansas City, Missouri, and my grandfather was raised on a farm in Oklahoma. And unfortunately, my great grandmother and grandfather hired a dishonest lawyer to pay the property tax on the land. And the land was sold in a tax lien sale without any notice given to my grandfather or my great grandmother. And because of that, we lost the land. And so now the elders have told me that where my grandfather's house used to be, there's an oil pump moving up and down. And so I don't trust a lot of lawyers based on my own family's experience. And that's why I became a lawyer.
Rightfully so. We have another one from Jessica Okolo. She says, "Thank you. This is very informative session." And Gail Griffin, "My mom's home is in both our names. If she has to go into a nursing home under Medicaid, can they take the house?"
Yes, if you don't get the land and the home out of her name.
Wow. Okay.
So you have to, you won't even qualify. You have to get the land out of her name to even qualify and be approved for Medicaid. And so definitely pick up my book. I have not included Maryland or DC in there. The fourth edition includes, I just added Rhode Island, Vermont, I think Connecticut and Nebraska. And then that's in addition to the 17 other states that were in the third edition of the book. But a lot of the general information would be a good resource for you.
Okay. Thank you so much. And we have another question from Andrea Hart. She says, "Does your work intersect with Thomas Mitchell, who focuses on heirs property out of University of Texas?"
Yes, somewhat so it does, but he's definitely focused more on policy, of course, with the adoption of the Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Act. I may have got the name not proper, but properly stated. But essentially, he's been definitely pivotal with getting that adopted. I think it's close to 25 states that it's been adopted. And so it's also been adopted in South Carolina, which is where the Beckett case took place. And so it basically prevents what happened to the Beckett case from happening. It gives heirs property owners basically the right to offer the sale. So if your cousin wants to sell his portion, then he has to offer it to a family member. He can't just go off and sell it to a real estate developer. And so it gives them also time to come up with the money to purchase his share to buy him out, along with other protections. And then his second focus is in the classroom. He's primarily university, but I'm primarily grassroots, saving land on a case-by-case basis, programming and things of that nature, just of a traditional nonprofit structure.
Okay. And Miss Griffin has come back. She's the one who asked about her mom and being in a nursing home. She says she's already approved for Medicaid based on her yearly Social Security. So does that affect her house and the government's
I
ability to
believe
take it?
so. You should definitely refer to an elder care attorney. But I do consultations. So if you want to set up a consultation, definitely email me and we can talk further about, the situation.
And we're gonna run your social media and your email again before we close, so everyone can know how to reach out, how to maybe even help or get more information. So we have another question from Sandra Wood. She says, "What is the status with John Boyd?"
I don't know. I don't, yeah, I don't know. So, but he's busy, but I'm so swamped. I barely have time to eat, but I don't know. But I know he's very active in his work on social media, so I know that you can definitely keep up with him there.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, y'all, keep the questions coming. We have a few more moments. I have another question. For someone who reads your book, whether it's the abbreviated version or the long text, what is the one thing you hope that they glean from it?
With the abbreviated version, I definitely want people to realize that the history of the history of the Black freedmen, but particularly the five civilized tribes. The fourth chapter is my most personal chapter, and it's my favorite chapter. And that's why I included it in the short book version available at the bookstore, because it's the reason why I do the work. it's my grandfather. It's everything in that chapter. As far as the overall book, um, it's a textbook, so it's formatted as a textbook, and that's how it's going to be because it needs to be in curriculum. It needs to be in education, and so there is it's the full book is formatted as a textbook, and it also has a separate curriculum to it that includes my old syllabus from 2009, my exam questions, answer key, classroom exercises, and then within the full book it already includes chapter review questions, case studies, and summaries, and a glossary. So,
How would you recommend someone who wants to teach it invite it into their curriculum or like at a university level? How could they make that possible?
well, it's already outlined as you know, most semesters are 12 weeks, it's 12 chapters, and the curriculum outlines everything for the professor and the teacher. And even if, you know, it's not offered at a university or law school level, and, you know, it's offered, I don't know, with race, you know, critical race theory, I don't know, controversy, but if it is offered, you know, in schools, it can be offered that way as well. And I'm willing to help to get it into schools because it's very important. I've put years into this book, so I really wanted to educate young people.
Yes, can you talk about that? I mean, before we came on, you mentioned that you started the book in 2007, I think.
Yes. Yeah, I started it as a white paper assignment when I worked for the Missouri Department of Conservation back in 2006, and it was brought to me in early '07. And so the first three chapters definitely focus on Kansas, Iowa, and Missouri, which is where I'm from. And so that's part of the reason, but it's heavy on conservation as well, because that's part of the initiative of my work is always conservation easements, land protection, because again, just overall, we are losing, you know, 175 acres per hour, according to, you know, the American Farmland Trust report back in 2009. It's a really great report. So we're losing it at massive rates.
Incredible. We do have another question. This one is from Sandra Woods. Do you work with the heirs in South Carolina, one of the islands?
No, I don't work with heirs on the islands, but mostly in the PD region and in the Beaufort County region.
Okay. Okay, it is 7:45. Do you have a few more moments before we close out? Okay.
Yes.
Um, as someone in the younger generation who might be looking at getting land, how do you suggest people go about doing it in a very morally right way with integrity? What's the best way you would approach buying land?
Right. Well, I would definitely reach out to older landowners that are willing to enter into a private sale with you. And so it's always good to get those types of you know, inside affiliates, because then you can basically, it's between you and the landowner, and you can set up payment options and down payments that, you know, at are an affordable rate. And oftentimes those farmers only want to sell to Black people, they don't want to sell to anybody else. And so that, you know, that's definitely one way to secure land.
Thank you. Um, Sugar Shy 45 Lee Hemp Farm. What a name. I love it. What are your suggestions when dealing with NRCS issues?
um Personally, I advise my farmers not to deal with USDA if they don't have to. So that's always my first suggestion. But then the second is you can always file a civil rights complaint, um, you know, against USDA. And so prior to working for on my own through farms, I worked for USDA in the Office of Civil Rights in DC. And so there you can file a complaint and start that process. But that process, definitely is skewed and it's not objective. It's not objectively fair to the Black farmer, unfortunately. I would definitely get everything in writing. I would definitely, if when you are dealing with them, have witnesses to, the meeting. So definitely don't go by yourself. If you go by yourself, record on your phone, and you inform them that you're recording, but record on your phone and try to get everything in writing. Why not do it? Because it's a century old department that is based on land theft, particularly regarding Black land theft. USDA is the number one, thief of Black land. And, that is the history of the Black farmers lawsuit that was filed in 1997. And so, there's numerous different, reports dating back to the 1965 Civil Rights Report that basically has USDA admitting to discriminatory practices regarding Black farmers. So why would you deal with USDA when they have admitted on paper and even verbally all the way up to last month with Vilsack that they have discriminated in the past and present? Why would you deal with someone like that? That's just my opinion.
Thank you. He says, okay, understood. He got it. He understands. Okay. I think that was the last question. And was there anything, one last word that you wanted to leave the audience with?
Definitely support organizations that do the work honestly, and definitely if you're dealing with a lawyer, just make sure that you get everything in writing, because often when it's not USDA, it's also lawyers and real estate developers that are taking the land in unscrupulous ways. And so you definitely, want to make sure that you have things in writing. And just because a person, says they're a real estate developer or an investor, don't trust them. Definitely just do your due diligence, especially when you're dealing with USDA.
Well, thank you so much. Can you please give out your email address and your social media handles or anything else, any other way that we can reach you?
Sure. You can reach me at Facebook at Jillian Hishaw on my like page. And then you can reach me at info@jillianhishaw.com. And then you can also purchase all books and products at jillianhishaw.com. And Sankofa.
And Sankofa, yes. Thank you so much. This has been really illuminating, really incredible. Like I can honestly not even believe the numbers you've been giving us about our land and how it's being taken. So I hope everyone found this to be very helpful. You can purchase the book again at sankofa.com, or we just got in, thank you so much, more copies. So you can purchase them at the store as well. And as always, we'll be here to provide any information you need on how to get in contact. If you weren't able to catch her social media handles and whatnot, just holler at Sankofa and we got you. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you so much again to Jillian Hishaw Esquire. Thank you again for all your work you do as well. And everyone have a great evening and we'll see you the next time.